Sorry about that. We had a minor technical issue, or major, however you want to look at it. So we're going to start again with the video. Once I get the thumbs up from the production crew here, and we're going.
Welcome to the Marshfield and Old Colony Railroad.
It set along the Massachusetts South Shore during the Great Depression.
This 8x16 ON30 layout is based on John Allen's time-saver switching puzzle.
The large map shows the extent of the Old Colony Railroad just before it was taken over by the New Haven. The Old Colony's network covered most of southern Mass and parts of Rhode Island.
The inset map shows the modeled portion of the Old Colony, very loosely based on the Greenwich line between Scituate and Marshfield. A fictitious branch breaks off towards Scituate Harbor.
We hope you enjoy the show.
Okay. Well, Mike, now we got through with that. That was a pretty darn good presentation. Do you have any extra information you'd like to add relative to your railroad for the audience out there?
I now you put me on the spot because I was hoping to get questions I could answer. So let me ad lib. I guess a good way to put it is some of my friends have been kind of trying to convince me to operate the railroad, and if I ever get it to where it runs well, I might do that. But I really enjoy building things. I like taking pictures. I like building things, and I'm glad you guys enjoyed my video. I suppose I'm running into someone else's time now. So
Don't worry about
why
that
don't I
for a second. We're not too far off the mark here at this point in time, even with all the delays. So, but no, I will attest the fact you are a great modeler. I've seen a lot of your work over the years, and you've always impressed me with the detail by which you can do things. Operations,
thank you.
yeah, getting your trains to operate sometimes it's like George Celios, do they always work?
Yeah, it seems that I remember the fellow that spoke last night said he liked building models and he liked operating, and that's a rarity.
Yeah,
People
that's true.
seem to be more into one aspect of that than the other.
Yeah,
I found when I first started, I could run trains or I could build stuff, and I almost always chose to build stuff.
right. But
But over another thing, over the years, I've been parts of different operating groups, and if I go once or twice a month, that's plenty for me. I've had fun with it. I've done that, and you know, so that's there's no real future. I may expand the layout now, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure where I'm going to go from here.
all right. So, well, again, sorry for the interruptions we have, but thank you for participating and sharing views of your railroad. And if anybody's down in Marshfield, you heard Mike say, come by and take a look at it firsthand. And we should be in good shape. So, again, thanks, Mike.
Well, thank you for having me, and the offer's open. I expect I'll get about 3 people over the next 5 years, but if you come, you're welcome. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. Good evening, all again. Welcome back. Our next presenter is a person that has been in both the National Motor Railroad Association and National Railway Historical Society for over 50 years. He's an author of the book Short Line Railroads of Long Island. He has an interest in both narrow gauge railways, trolleys, interurban lines, and the fire service. He has been a visitor to the narrow gauge railways of North Wales several times since his retirement from the US government early in 2009. He has presented clinics at both the 2018 and 2019 Northeastern Region NMRA clinics. And at this time, I'd like to present Ed Kola.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the introduction. Tonight's subject is the Welsh Highland Railway, and since we're running a little late, if you don't mind, I'll try and run this a little fast, but please, I'm not trying to run over you. I'm just trying to get the production team a chance to catch up. However, as I go along, if you have any questions, please enter them in the chat box and they will be addressed at the end of the clinic. I should also remind you that I have handouts that are in the convention book. So if you want to go and download those, some of your questions may be answered there. Okay, locating the Welsh Highland Railway in North Wales. This is Carnarvon, and the line goes from Carnarvon to Porthmadog. Now, some of you who are familiar with Welsh narrow gauge also know that Porthmadog is the home to the Festiniog Railway, which goes from Porthmadog to Blaenau Festiniog. Put this all into perspective. Here is Liverpool. Here is Manchester. Some guy named George Stevenson had an idea about putting a railroad linking those two towns together once. And down in this corner is Birmingham. Okay, here's a map of the Welsh Highland Railway from their 2019 brochure. And we'll visit all of the stations here in one or two extras: Porthmadog, Bedgwellert, Rideau, Wanfair, and Carnarvon. Just a word of warning, my pronunciation of Welsh city and place names will probably cause an international incident before the end of this presentation, so please bear with me. Carnarvon to Dinas. The Nantilly Railway Company was incorporated on May 20th, 1825 to build a 40-inch gauge horse tramway from a point in the parish of Llanelli to the wharfs in Carnarvon. The line was opened for goods traffic, which we would call freight, on July 12th, 1828. The Carnarvonshire Railway acquired control of the Nantilly Railway during 1862. The Carnarvon to Dinas junction section was then rebuilt and converted to standard gauge. The Carnarvonshire Railway was a part of the London and Northwestern Railway, a later component of the London, Midland, and Scottish Railway. The former London and Northwestern Railway branch line succumbed to the Beeching Axe on December 7th, 1964. In June 1995, an application for a light railway order was made to build a 1-foot, 11.5-inch line over the former London and Northwestern Railway line between Carnarvon and Dinas. The reinstated line opened on November 10th, 1997. And one of the Nantilly tramways pieces of rolling stock, Wagon 41, survives. It's been restored and it's on display at Penrhyn Castle Museum in Wales. Heading further south along what is now the Welsh Highland, we're going to look at the Dinas to Rideau section. On August 6, 1872, Parliament approved the construction of the Mole Tryfen undertaking of the North Wales Narrow Gauge Railway. From Dinas to a temporary station named Quillen opened for goods traffic only on May 21st, 1887. The branch from Tryfen Junction to Bringwyn opened by August 15th, 1877. The North Wales Narrow Gauge Railway opened to Rideau, also known as South Snowdon, on May 14th, 1881. Here's a recreated North Wales Narrow Gauge Railway coal wagon. This was their number 3. And like most places, the freight roster was mixed up. This is a covered van, or what we would call a box car, uh, also that's been recreated. While this is a Festiniak slate wagon, this is typical of the type of car that dominated the rolling stock on the North Wales Narrow Gauge Railway. This car would carry about 5 tons of slate. Going south, further south, Rhydyp to Bedgulert, the Porthmadog, Bedgulert, and South Snowdon Railway was incorporated on August 17th, 1901, with plans to build an electrified, let me repeat that, electrified 2-foot gauge line from Rhydyp to Bedgulert. The firm would also be involved in the electric supply business. Track was constructed south from Rhydyp towards Bedgulert. It was considered complete between 1906 and 1910. This line was never opened. However, their electric business did open, and after World War II, it was nationalized. This overpass over the A498 road in Bedgulert, built by the PB&SS, was never used. Nearby are 2 bridge piers, also never used. The PB&SS purchased the Russell and gave it to the North Wales Narrow Gauge to operate trains on their behalf. What might have been a painting of a PB&SS electric locomotive and a train. This was actually done by the County Public Works organization, this painting, because you notice there's a steam road roller here and they're busy paving the road. And this is that overpass that we saw a few moments ago. Finally, the Welsh Highland Railway Light Railway. Yeah, we're going to have a few similar names here. So the Welsh Highland Railway Light Railway, love English corporations for their parenthetical expressions, was chartered on March 30th, 1922. So it's a rather late comer to the narrow gauge field. The North Wales Narrow Gauge Railway, the Porthmadog, Bedgulert, and South Snowdon Railway, yeah, easy for me to say, were acquired along with trackage rights over the Crosier Tramway into Porthmadog. New construction would be put in place between Bedgulert and a junction with the Crosier Tramway. The line was opened from Dinas Junction to Porthmadog on June 8, 1923. The line was leased to the Festiniog at times. On June 19, 1937, the last train on the Welsh Highland Railway was run. Do the math, it existed for a little over 14 years. Here's the Welsh pony from the Festiniog going on to the Victoria Bridge in Porthmadog in 1935. The Russell and the 590 pass at Bedgulert during the 1934 season. This is the Russell on the right. An overview of the Dinas Junction station in 1934. The London Northwestern, or by then the London Midland and Scottish, is located at the left. This is the station building, the Junction Station building. This is the North Wales Narrow Gauge goods shed. And this is the station master's house. The Moltrafon, one of the 3 locomotives owned by the Welsh Highland Railway, awaiting its next assignment. The Welsh Highland Railway Light Railway Company closed on May 31st, 1937, as we said. The trackage between Crosier Junction and Dinas was requisitioned by the Ministry of Defense on March 13th, 1941. They took the track up. However, the Welsh Highland Railway was never formally abandoned. And that's key to our story. It was in bankruptcy and it was in the hands of the official government receiver. A restoration was begun by the Welsh Highland Railway Society beginning in 1961. The Welsh Highland Railway Society has evolved into the Welsh Highland Heritage Railway, which operates a museum devoted to the narrow gauge in the Bedgulert siding area of Porthmadog. And let's ride a train. The Gertrude is arriving at the Welsh Highland Heritage Railway's Porthmadog station. This ticket for the Welsh Highland Heritage Railway has privileges. The usual operating pattern has the train leave Porthmadog, operate to Pennymount, The locomotive then runs around the train and returns to the Gellert Farm platform where passengers detrain to see the exhibits there. The line is not even a mile long. Gellert's Farm Station, where the Welsh Highland Heritage Railway maintains a museum and works. Now, we would call works shops. And if you look in this picture, the green building is the museum. The shops are the gray colored buildings beyond the white signal box in the distance. The Gellert's Farm signal box controls the sidings into the works located here. This is a staffed as needed facility. End of the Welsh Highland Heritage Railway passenger service, the station at Pennymount. The junction with the reinstated Welsh Highland Railway at Pennymount. You can see the white marks here. This is the dividing line between the Welsh Highland Heritage Railway and the Welsh Highland Railway Light Railway. Meantime, Gertrude has arrived at Pennymount and will run around its train. Gertrude begins to run around its train at Pennymount. Let's take a look at our train. We've already seen Gertrude. This is a semi-closed North Wales narrow gauge railway carriage number 8, the famous Gladstone car. It was called the famous Gladstone car because Gladstone, who was then Prime Minister, rode in this car at one time. Festiniog Railway Tourist Bogie 42 was one of 6 purchased for use on the Welsh Highland Railway. And the only difference between what it was originally and now, you see these little gates around the chain at the seats. Originally, this was all open. The Eisenstadt coach, which was built in 1987. The Eisenstadt is an annual cultural festival in Wales where they do nothing but speak the Welsh language in poems, speeches, and song. Here's Carriage 9. This is a recreation of North Wales narrow gauge 9 built in 2010. The brake van is the former Great Western Railway 136 from the Vale of Rydal Railway. Gertrude at the Gellert's Farm platform, time to visit the museum. The Emma at the Gellert's Farm platform. Let's take a moment to view some of the rolling stock at Gellert's Farm. Karen came from the Selukwe Peak Light Railway in Rhodesia, Africa. We're going to visit a number of continents in this trip. The number 4 of the Welsh Highland Heritage is a classic simplex product of the motor rail firm with an added cab. The Romanian-built Lid 260 in the shed at Gellert's Farm. There are 3 of these currently in Porthmadog. From the New Rossett Quarry, the McGrid, which is simply a cable gripping wagon. Thirsty? Open Wagon 27 has been sponsored by the Purple Moose Brewery. That's not their product inside the tank, that's Weed Killer. The Welsh Highland Light Railway Limited. Circa 1987, the Festiniog Railway purchased the former Welsh Highland Railway Light Railway track bed from the official receiver. Dinas to Wanfar reopened during August 2000. Wanfar to Rideau reopened on August 18, 2003, minus its Brigwyn branch line. The old North Wales narrow gauge railway was back. Rideau to Hafferty Lynn via the Aberglasslyn Pass was reopened on May 22, 2009. On October 30, 2010, the revived line into Porthmadog was opened. The goal of the Porthmadog, Bedgellert, and South Snowdon Railway was finally achieved a century after all its efforts had ceased on that project. It was one thing to reinstate the Welsh Highland Railway. It then became another project to provide it with locomotives and rolling stock. With little appropriate equipment available in Wales, imported motive power and newly built passenger carriages became the order of the day. Some of our production staff is located in Australia, but I don't think they're located in this part of Australia. Tasmanian State Railways K1 was an early acquisition of motive power. Tasmania is located in the far south east of Australia. Former South African Railways 87 taking water at Carnarvon. And actually, it's NGG 1687. The South African Railways always included the class of the locomotive in the number. Here's NG 16138 during a layover on an outbound train at Pontcrossor. These pictures were taken in 2009, and each of the Bear Garretts was painted a different color. Blue, green, and black. Blue, red, and black, or green. The former NGG 16143 standing at Porthmadog ground frame. Two former South African Railway narrow gauge 282s are awaiting restoration. One of them is about halfway along. The other one is pretty much as you see here. A diesel locomotive from a South African industry is also on the roster. Originally Welsh Highland Railway summer bogie 23 dates from 1893 and is still in service. This car had been used on the Festiniog Railway and they sent it back to the Welsh Highland. The 2002 vintage recreation of North Wales narrow gauge summer bogie 24 in Porthmadog on the Victoria Bridge. Carriage 2043 is typical of the modern equipment used on the Welsh Highland Railway. This is in Carnarvon. And all open observation cars are also in the consist of each train. This is the 2022 here in Porthmadog. Also in Porthmadog, on-train service is supported by a purpose-built car. The 2011 is one of the two in service. First-class passengers are accommodated in two cars. One is Pullman car 2115 bodies gallon. This car has since been replaced by a Pullman observation car with the same name, bodies gallon. It's held in reserve without a name. Excuse me. The Pullman observation car 2100 Glassland is the other first-class car and is the pride of the fleet. The reinstated Welsh Highland Railway has little use for goods vehicles, this former South African Railway flat wagon being one of 13. Coal car B934 is one of 14 open wagons that are in coal service on the Welsh Highland Railway and the Festiniog. Welsh Highland Railway's current computer-generated ticket. Not really railroady. In fact, I think airline tickets are more interesting than this, but it's well worth the ride. And we're going to take a ride. And finally, Ed, you're finishing with all the damn talking. Let's see some train pictures. The site of the Nantley Tramways Wharf in Carnarvon is now a parking lot. And the castle you see over there to the right, that's Carnarvon Castle, which is where the Prince of Wales is invested whenever it's time to invest a Prince of Wales. Here's an older picture showing the Nantley Tramways Yard in Carnarvon in London Northwestern Railway days, and you can see a little bit more of the castle here. In the immediate foreground is basically just beyond where the current Welsh Highland Railway station is located. At Carnarvon Station, this former London and Northwestern Tunnel might be the route of future expansion. The original Carnarvon Station was a prefab building. There's the castle in the background. The new permanent Carnarvon Station opened during 2019. At the time I took this picture, it had been open about 2 weeks. And inside the station, the Watkin is on display. This is a De Winton vertical boiler steam locomotive that has no relation to the Welsh Highland, except the De Winton Foundry in Carnarvon is located across the street from the Welsh Highland Railway Station. They were the builders of a lot of vertical boiler steam locomotives. This was their erecting shed. Carnarvon Station with the 143 running around its train. That's the Pullman carriage there to its right. And the 143 about to depart Carnarvon on a southbound train. And we're moving down to Dinas. This is the carriage shed at Dinas, but there are a number of locomotives stored in it too. The Vale of Festiniog, which is actually a Festiniog railway locomotive with a train in the yard at Dinas. And you can see the observation Pullman car behind it. Former South African Railways brake van in the Dinas yard. Here's the goods shed at Dinas, which now, when it's not being used to store equipment, is cleared out and becomes a venue for things like ale festivals and railfan enthusiast meetings. The 9, when restored, it had some derailment issues. Let's just say it's a work in progress. And these are some spare, behind it is some spare passenger coaches on the Welsh Highland. Here's the former North Wales Narrow Gauge Railway passenger station at Dinas Junction. It still survives. And we saw that earlier in the black and white. And here's the Welsh Highland Railway provided the Dinas station master with this house. And I pointed out that house in the black and white picture. The original route of the Welsh Highland Railway south of Dinas station. The new route is to the right, the other side of the trees there. Here's the engine shed at Dinas Junction from a passing train. And that's either Bill or Ben, the shop switcher at Dinas. The Guelty, or works at Dinas, across the track south of the engine shed. At the time that this picture was taken, there were 2 of the Bear Garretts in there being overhauled, and one of the 282s being worked on. North Wales Narrow Gauge Tryfan Junction Station was being restored in 2009. And by 2019, it was back together and standing proud. It basically is not stopped at, and it's pretty much out in the middle of nowhere, except there's a walking path that comes right up to it. And here we are at the 143 at Wanfar Station. The Wanfar Station erected for the reopening of the Welsh Highland. Well, when the supporters finished Tryfan Junction, they moved on to Wanfair and decided to recreate the original station that was there. And they were making good progress on it up until COVID hit. Deep in the Snowdonia scenery in the area of the Snowdon Ranger Station. This is Snowdon National Park in Wales. The scenery is wonderful and magnificent. Do go there. If not for the trains, just to look out the window. And here's Snowdon Ranger Station back in the day. Note the Festiniog Railway equipment. Those curly roof vans are giveaways, and the little 040 England engines. The 143 pulling up to the water tank at Rideau. Pitt's Head Rock, the iconic scenic attraction at Pitt's Head Rock Hall. Now, right here, this side of the rock is supposed to look like William Pitt, who was Prime Minister of the United Kingdom during the reign of George III. He's the man for whom Pittsburgh is named. He was also Prime Minister during the American Revolution. Here's 87 storming upgrade at Pontka Cairngorms. Trains to Porthmadog are limited to 15 miles per hour downgrade here. Here's the 87 passing under the overbridge 173 near Pont Cairngorms. And after it comes under the bridge, it goes out. So I just ran to the other side, carefully ran to the other side, and got a picture at the rear. Now, this is an unusual picture for Wales. Notice there are cattle out in that field. Inevitably, if you see a field in Wales, it's going to have sheep in it. And South African Railways 138 on the double horseshoe curve above Bedgalaret Station. And here's Bedgalaret in the 1930s. That's a Festiniog engine on the left, a Welsh Highland one in the center rear. Here's the new station buildings at Bedgallert were designed by the Forestry Commission. Since they're inside Snowdonia National Park, they have control over the design of all structures. They don't really resemble what the Welsh Highland Railway had at this location. Here's a Welsh Highland train passing through the Aberglaston Pass. Any image you take fails to capture the beauty or the size of this place. So I apologize for the poor picture. And here's another poor picture, but this has the value of being from the 1930s, shortly before the line was shut down. And Hafferty Lynn halt with an inbound train halt by the 87. Now remember, that locomotive is 2-foot gauge. Excuse me, 1 foot 11.5 inches. And here's the rear of that same train with the Pullman observation car, and in front of it, one of the service cars. The side of Crossy Junction with the new Welsh Highland Railway turning off of the crosser. The gray arrow is approximately where the original tracks were. Just north of Pont Cressor is an osprey preserve. The mating season held up the Welsh Highland Railway reconstruction for about 6 months. And in 2011, 2012, a midday train turned at Pont Cressor, sort of in the middle of nowhere. Here, the 87 is running around its train at this location. Something I've always noticed about 2-foot gauge equipment, whether they're engineers in our country or drivers in the UK, they always seem to be standing outside of the cab. Here's a connecting train for Porthmadog passengers with Festiniog Railway. This came in about an hour after the train had turned around. The steam-hailed train had turned around and headed back up for Carnarvon. The Pont Cressor Station Shelter, a typical Welsh Highland Railway building based on the original design. Just north of Porthmadog, the 87 leads a train towards Carnarvon. The Mulwins, which are those twin mountains, are to the rear. The Welsh Highland Railway crosses the National Rail Network just out of Porthmadog. When the National Rail Network heard that the Welsh Highland wanted to cross, they basically said, well, we're going to need a 2-year timetable before we'll allow the track to be built. The Festiniog Railway went to Parliament, and it was done within 6 months. The 87 leaves the Crosstown Link, as the trackage is now known, and starts across the Victoria Bridge as the sun sets behind it. Rear three-quarters view as the 8143 crosses the Victoria Bridge in Porthmadog. And by the way, there are sirens blaring, there are lights flashing. This is an unbelievable moment when these trains are crossing the road here. Here's the Vale of Festiniog crossing the Victoria Bridge in the A497 road in Porthmadog. And the 143 coming out of the Porthmadog station grounds onto the roadway and is about to cross the Victoria Bridge. Festiniog Railway first-class observation car, second 100 on a shuttle train from Pont Cressor. And in the days before they rebuilt Porthmadog Station, the Welsh Highland Railway trains came onto the Festiniog here. They pulled halfway across the Cobb, and the station switcher would then pull the passenger cars back into the platform. They've since built a platform in this area. And here's an example of when they used to pull the train into the station. This is the 4-wheel diesel mechanical Upner Castle, bringing the train into Porthmadog Harbour Station. Here's Welsh Highland Railway train standing in the then single platform Harbour Station in Porthmadog. And In those days, for most departures going to Carnarvon, the station pilot pulled the train out onto the cob, followed by the train locomotive, which would then couple on and pull the Welsh Highland Railway train out onto the Victoria Bridge and on up to Carnarvon. Here's the 138 departing Harbor Station after a day's run, and now it's standing in the Festiniog Boston Lodge Works between runs. Okay, we'll take questions in a few moments, but there's a few other lines that often don't get the attention that they deserve, and they don't deserve a lot of attention because they're minor, but let's just take them 25 panels and take a look at them. Creating the port, building the cob. A double track 3-foot gauge line was on the cob from 1808 to 1811 and from 1814 to 1830. This is preceding the Festiniog. The cob created the harbor at Porthmadog. This line was used to move rock from a quarry on the far shore to build and then repair the cob. The cob was later occupied by the Festiniog. The quarry is in the distance, as indicated by the gray arrow, and that's a Festiniog train. And a closer view of the quarry site. Boston Lodge Works of the Festiniog is now located on the quarry floor. The Tremadoc Tramway. The 3-foot gauge Tremadoc Tramway was built alongside the Wysit Canal. Actually, Wysit, it translates as the cut. It opened between 1840 and 1845 to move limestone. The Gorsadoo Tramway built a 6.25-mile extension to the 1.6-mile Tremadoc in 1856 and to 1857. But by July 1870, the combined line was an economic failure. However, that didn't stop the Gorsadoo Junction and Porthmadog Railways from incorporating on July 5th, 1872, to build a 5-mile-long 2-foot gauge extension to the original 3-foot gauge Tremadoc and Gorsadoo Tramway. The line was basically abandoned circa 1895, but it has left some wonderful remains. Here's a map of the Gorsadoo Junction and Porthmadog Railways from the James I.C. Boyd book. This is also in the handout. The GJ and PR right-of-way in Porthmadog is now a public street. There's a gas station over to the right, and that was where the GJ and PR unloaded their slate. And now let's go to the other end of this street. That was the location of Mr. Hubbard's Crossing, the site of the GJ and PR crossing the national rail system. Right here. Mr. Hubbard's Crossing is at the entrance to the Welsh Highland Heritage Railway. And that's Mr. Hubbard's Crossing is located right here. And if we turn around, literally turn around, the right-of-way of the line along the Wysit Canal in Porthmadog, and it goes straight along this canal to Tremadoc. Past Tremadoc, we come to Pemorpha. This is one railway terrace in Pemorpha. It was built to house GJ and PR railway workers. Remember, this was the early Victorian era, and businesses were usually built houses to accommodate their workers. It was not uncommon. And that's something that continued into the coal mine area in Pennsylvania and other coal mine areas. And I have a presentation on on 3 Pennsylvania coal mine towns, if anyone's interested. At Hennefall, the GJ and PR actually had a tunnel. It's mostly silted in, but it's still discernible. And the De Winton Land Fair is similar to the GJ and PR's Soul locomotive. This is a typical brake slate wagon. It's Festiniog 946, and this would have been the type of car used on the behind that vertical boiler steam locomotive. Abandoned in 1895, the line is still traceable as a farm track. The Prince of Wales slate mill ruin is the largest remnant of the GJ and PR. And this is a magnificent 4-story structure. With this This is not a wall. This is a ramp to allow railroad cars to be brought into or slate wagons more particularly, to be brought into the mill. Here's a closer view of the Prince of Wales. And here's the rail ramp, which I pointed out before, going into the second floor of the mill. And the site of the railway between the mill and the quarry, again, it's a farm track. And a closer view of the rubbish dump at the Prince of Wales Quarry, which was last used in 1895. Let's head back to Porthmadog for our next subject. Crosier Tramway, opened by August 1st, 1864, as a goods and mineral line with horsepower. Incorporated as the Crosier and Porthmadog Railway on July 5th, 1895, the Welsh Highland Railway Light Railway took over the Crosier Junction to Porthmadog Harbour section as of June 1st, 1923. The Welsh Highland Railway Light Railway ceased using the Crosier Tramway during February 1937. The Festiniog Railway would occasionally operate goods service on the lower portion of the line until the middle of the 1950s. Here's a map of the lower section of the Crosier Tramway. And here's the upper section. I'm starting to run a little tight on time, so let me go a little fast. Okay, we mentioned that the Welsh Highland Railway between Harbour and Crosier Junction. And here where the Crosier crossed the National Rail. Here was the junction. Looking downgrade from the Park Quarry, this is the original line here by the arrow. And here's an iron wagon from the Park Quarry on the Crosier Tramway at the Ballow Lake Railway. This is the hoisting house, which is between the upper and lower inclined planes. It's now a cottage. A bridge from the Crosier still in use in Crosier Village. And the Crosier Tramway ends with an end-on connection to a private railway right in this site right here. It's virtually discernible except for the brush along the right-of-way. The private railway finally ended at this small hydroelectric plant, and there was also an incline railway that went up to a service slate quarry. Join me during Mill City 2021 when I will discuss the birthplace in our gauge, the Festiniog Railway, and that show will sort of tie in everything that I've delivered to you here tonight. Thank you for attention and attendance. If you had any questions, I hope you've entered them in the chat box. Please do it now if you haven't entered anything. The photographs, except the ones with caption surrounds, are mine and were either taken in 2011 or 2019. And the copyright is from text is from 2020. So at this point, if there are any questions, Jerry, I would be more than happy to handle them. Or
at this point, I've got one question that I'm going to take very quickly. What's a cob?
What's a what?
Cob. C-O-B.
Cob. Oh, the cob is the name of a dam that was artificially built across the mouth of the Aberglasslyn River in Porthmadog.
Okay, great.
What's funny is when the Festiniog started to modify it about 2 years ago, somebody sued saying they were disrupting a natural structure. And when Festiniog walked in with the history of the property, the courts probably said, plaintiff, you don't have a case.
There you go. Sounds like something's good. Well, that was a great presentation, Ed. We really do appreciate it. And this, and again, sorry for having run late and made you run a little fast, but it is unfortunately live TV.
I understand. I hope I'm finished in time for the next guy to have be able to salvage something, or maybe I got you a little bit more back on time.
Yeah, we're working close to it. Thank you again very much.
Okay. And Brad, thank you for monitoring this from down under. Okay, then say hello to Speed for me. And I'm going to get the hell out of here.
welcome back, everybody. We're up to our award section this evening. And again, just a quick summary. Bill Brown is the Honorary Achievement Program Chairman for the Northeastern Region. Ken May is the Model Contest Chairman for the Northeastern Region. Kaylee, sorry about that, Kaylee. Zhang is the Photo Contest Chairwoman for the Northeastern Region. Tonight, we've got Kaylee again here. She's waving hi to everybody. And tonight, she's going to present the Model Color Photos and the Model Contest Category Structures Awards.
I know. Isn't that a mouthful, Jerry?
That's a mouthful. Right. So I'm going to turn it over to you. You're up.
Well, thank you, Jerry. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the hobby shop, also known as my basement. So tonight we have an interesting category. It was a category that was very competitive and very tough for the judges. The whole competition, to be brutally honest, was tough for the judges. But tonight especially was especially challenging. So let me go ahead and start sharing my screen. Okay. Share, come on. Work with me here. All right, and let's go into full screen. So tonight is the third night of our virtual contest. And as Jerry mentioned, we're going to be covering the categories of model structures and then model color photography. So without further ado, let's go right into it. We'll start off with the photo contest. Now tonight, we have another clean sweep. Our winner for the third place, second place, and first place is all one gentleman. Who had previously won in the photo category prototype color as well. And so for tonight's hat trick for you hockey fans, and then your turkey for your bowling fans, goes to Bruce Shepard. Unfortunately, I checked our staff kitchen this morning, and the milk carton with Bruce's picture on it unfortunately went sour, so we had to toss it. So sorry, guys, we lost Bruce's photo. So that wraps up the photo contest, and we'll move straight into the structure contest. Now, this category, I absolutely do not envy the judges whatsoever. We had many good entries with the for the structure contests, and this was a very hard fought battle with to place the first three, the top three. Really, any of the entries could have won, but the judges have spoken, and I made sure Steve Harvey did not touch the ballots. So here we go. In third place, we have Mike Tylick with the Situate Marine Supply. Now, Mike built this building based on a real property, and if you visit our Mill City 2020 website and scroll down about midway, you can click on the model contest and then scroll through that to see the actual photography of the real place that Mike built the structure off of. So coming in on second place, we have Bradford Station by Tom Oxnard. Tom is a fabulous modeler. I remember actually filling in for a judge's role last year when I believe it was either last year or the year before, when he submitted for motive power category and took first place in that group. So beautiful work here done by the Bradford Station by Tom. And now we move into the first place winner for the model contest structures category. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could get some drum rolls, please. And there we go. It is H.H. Richardson Design Station by Jim Murphy. This particular entry, I remember actually going through when it was first published, just sitting there watching and looking through the photos and just absorbing the amount of details that Jim had put into this model. And it was one of those photos where the more you looked, the more you saw, the more you found, and the more interesting it got. So congratulations, Jim. And then also congratulations to all of tonight's winners, Bruce, Mike, Tom, Jim. Welcome to the winner circles of the competition. Congratulations once again. You guys had done a phenomenal job. And then I would be remiss again to not remind you, if you don't, to visit our website, Mill City 2020, to go take a look at the entries, as well as the entries of other people who have submitted to this contest. Again, the competition was very intense. I do not envy the judges whatsoever, but hopefully this will serve as inspiration to others, and we highly encourage you to submit for Mill City 2021. As much as we complain about the work, we actually love, we the judges as well as the contest staff, love seeing all these entries and love having our lives made difficult by making that tough call and that tough decision. So again, Mill City 2020 to see the entries of the winners as well as entries of everyone else. Thank you to everyone who participated this year in making this competition a success. We still have one more night to go, but in the meantime, I hope everyone's having a great time and finding all these clinics and wonderful clinics that our clinicians are putting together, as well as the layout tours that we have. So with that in mind, Jerry, I turn it back to you.
Thanks again, Kaylee. We appreciate the hard work you and the committee do on trying to select these things. I wouldn't want to be in your position, trust me.
Well, we have fun with it. And a lot of whiskey could help too.
Hey, that's what it's all about. To have fun. If we can't have fun, then
Absolutely.
what are we doing, right?
Exactly. Absolutely.
Well, again, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Moving forward with this thing, with the achievement program, the system requirements for demonstrating skill in various aspects of our hobby, covering model building, scenery structures, track work, wiring, and service to the hobby. Bill Brown, who is our achievement chairman, will recognize the accomplishments of Northeastern Region members made in this program over the last year. So with that, Brad, can we run the list? Well, welcome back to part two of our evening. Again, a lot of congratulations to everybody who has had success in achievement in this year, and it's really exciting to see the number of people that are really working hard and diligent towards their MMR. Our next clinician to move on and keep the evening going, because we're still trying to catch up on time after our little hiccup earlier this evening. Our next clinician was born and raised on the Texas Gulf Coast. I have no idea why he moved to the Northeast. Memorized early by the long rumbling freights of the MKT, Cotton Belt, and Southern Pacific. Today, he's interested primarily in transition era operations of Eastern anthracite coal in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York, and the harbor connections in and around New York City. He's an N-scale modular working with N-Track, T-Track, and Fremo N standards, and with plans for an N-scale home layout as well. Someday I'd like to see that layout if you ever get to it. He has been an active member and volunteer of the NMRA for a dozen years and currently serves as president of the Northeastern region. He was the NER's newsletter editor for 4 years, a very thankless job, by the way, and on the BOD of the HUG division for 6, even less thankless. He is active in the NMRA's achievement program with 2 certificates, volunteer and official, completed, and 2 others, author and chief dispatcher, almost there. In the winter of 2020, he'll begin a new Fremo N module set with 2 additional certificates, civil and electrical engineering in view. He summarizes belief in model railroading this way: we come together to share our love for trains and stay together to share our love for one another. With that, we welcome John Doring. Of course, nobody knows who the heck he is. Anyway.
Hi, Jerry. Hi, Jerry. How do you like sitting in the big man's chair there, huh?
Hey, this is fun. Yeah.
Couldn't get the bow tie though, huh? Couldn't get the bow tie.
No. But I was going to break that tradition. I promised you guys that I was not going to do that. So.
Always the rebel. Always the rebel. Well, hello everyone. We're excited to be with you again. Instead of taking the risk that something might happen technically on this clinic, like Chuck, I had mine recorded, so I think we're ready to roll the video and share with you what we have here. Hi, everyone. I'm John Doring, and this is Take 2, Module Building Lessons Learned and some new ideas for the second time around. So what I want to do today is tell you a little bit about my story, my journey building my very first modules, really the first thing I built since I was a young child. But before I do that, let me take you back, because I want you to know just a little bit about me. I am crazy about trains. I'm crazy about model railroading and railroad modeling and prototypes and all things trains. And I bet you are as well, and that's why you're here. I grew up on the Texas Gulf Coast, and I was surrounded by trains, freight trains, Southern Pacific, Cotton Belt, Katy, those long rambling freights. They were black strings of tanker cars and dusty, dirty, covered hoppers in tans and grays and whites, all serving the petrochemical industry and the agricultural space. And they were everywhere around me. And as a 5 or 6 year old, I was just entranced by that. By the time I was 11 or 12, I had become a model railroader, and I had my own layout, a plywood Pacific 4x8, started with a Tyco train set. I was a true model railroader. And then I met some adults who were serious model railroaders, and I learned about the NMRA and even the MMR, the chance to be a master model railroader. And though that would be a long, long time kind of incubating inside, the seeds were there early on. But we're talking about 1972, and I've been a model railroader now for 40, almost 50 years without really doing very much, without building very much, a true armchair railroader. 72, long time ago, the Munich Olympics, the Nixon era, not the end of the space shuttle, but the beginning of the space shuttle program, back when the Dow was just 1,500 or so, a long time ago. And all I had to show for most of the period between then and not too long ago was a big stack of magazines. and lots of dreams. The question is why? Why is it like that? Why does that happen? Well, part of it is because I'm a dreamer, and I bet some of you are as well. And I dream a lot, but I have struggled to get going and get doing. But I don't fully apologize for that, because the dreaming is also a part of the hobby that I really enjoy. And so being an armchair railroader isn't all bad. And I've done plenty of designing and building in my head, but I started wanting to do more with my hands. But there's other obstacles too, right? Inexperience, haven't done it before, investment, there's time and effort and money. There's distractions and priorities. Life kind of happens to all of us along the way. There's this thing about perfection. We don't want to get started until we know exactly how it is we're going to do it. And fear. Why do we talk about that? Fear is such a strange kind of a word to think about in the context of a hobby. Remember when Franklin Roosevelt said, now almost 100 years ago, the only thing we have to fear is what? Fear itself. Well, sure, that made sense. And yet, when I think about as a model railroader, what about doing it wrong, doing it over, wasting money and looking like a fool? What about all those things, Franklin? Doing it wrong, doing it over, wasting lots of money, making mistakes, looking like a fool, having been, your peers ridicule you. Those were bouncing around in my head too. So what changed for me? Well, as I got near 50 years old, it suddenly occurred to me, if I didn't start soon and build something soon, I was going to run out of time. And so age was a big deal for me. That changed my motivation. That changed my vision. That got me over the hump and got me involved more in the hobby. My friend Ian Kemp at the local hobby store says, your second project won't be 10% better. It'll be 1,000% better. It won't be 10% better. It'll be 1,000% better. His point was, just do it. Just get going. Just build something. Don't worry about it. In the grander scheme, it's all a process, and you're always learning, and you're going to continue to do and grow and get better and improve and redo and let it go. Just get going. I started reflecting on this now 6 years ago or so, this idea of being an armchair railroader and what was changing about me. And it really boiled down to getting more involved with other people and then with clubs and building stuff and trying, and now kind of really becoming more active in the hobby. But, I always say too, that activity, taking action, is relative. Some of you out there are super fast builders, and some of you are super great builders and really talented. And I'm neither one of those. So action and activity, that's a relative term. But for me, going from doing almost nothing to now building my first module, and today I talk to you a little bit about the second set of modules, because this is also about lessons learned that went into what I call my Take Two modules. It's relative, but it's been more activity for me. So let me show you a little bit about my first module, and I ask you to be a little bit kind here, but here's the story of that first module. I'm an in-scale modeler, by the way, and so my module was an in-track module as I started. Now, here's the history. I started a long time ago, 2000, 2001, started thinking about it and designing in my head. By 2002, I had kind of cut all the lumber for the bench work, and then life happened. I had a change of job, a change of career, a move, got remarried, I had 2 children, lots of things happened in there, so nothing happened on my model railroad for several years. Fast forward to 2008 and 2009, I started putting the bench work together, laying the track, started the scenery about 2010, See, I'm not a very fast builder, but I was operational in 2012, and between 2013 and 15, I had this module in a number of club layouts and shows. Here I am in one of those first shows. The module at this point is about 50% done. The reason I show this picture is I want you to see that the module owner's got a smile on his face. Not perfect, it's not done, it's not even hardly started in some respects, but this new 12-foot long in-track module is in the layout and it's working. What I found as I got into this is I needed to learn how to do some stuff, right? I had to look for a local tribe, a local club, a local group to belong to. Now, I didn't do that because I wanted to have more friends. I'm kind of a shy and introverted person, and I didn't necessarily think I needed to go out and get a bunch of friends. What I needed was to learn how to do stuff. I needed to tap into expertise. I needed to to kind of get the information, get behind the ropes, look up under the modules. And I learned a lot through Intrac. They've got a lot of the information, the how-tos, the books, the magazines, the newsletter, but I also got community, and I did get friends, and I did get camaraderie, and it really helped me as I tried to build this first module. Here's some pictures from our big annual winter convention called Winterfest. Happens every January at the Amherst Railroad Show in Springfield, Massachusetts. Just a ton of fun, and Intrackers from all around the Northeast US and Canada, Eastern Canada come and participate in really, really big layouts. So let me go to 7 lessons I learned building this first module, and I'll show you some pictures of it along the way. And then we'll come back and talk about how we implemented some of those lessons learned into the new layout. All right, number 1, size matters a lot. Size matters a lot. Here is a brief picture of my first Intrac module. Remember I said it's 12 feet long, so what you can see here basically is 2 6-foot components. And there are 2 design elements I want to kind of point out here. The first is that I wanted my scene to kind of stand alone. So I wanted a scene break on each end. And it's very hard to see in this kind of dark slide, but on the upper right, there's a kind of a mountain, and there's a sort of a track that comes across on a bridge, sort of perpendicular to the main line. That's kind of a scene break on the right. And then in the lower left, there's another mountain way over kind of to the left, and a big fat river. And again, it kind of frames it out on that side. So that was element design sort of number 1. I wanted my little scene to be by itself, because you never know what you're going to get in an Intrac layout, whether the modules next to you are going to mix and match well or not, right? That was one idea. The second idea is I wanted to, so the Intrac standard is to have 3 parallel tracks, and Intrac is really, really good for displaying really long trains, lots of trains for the public. I didn't really like the way those 3 tracks look. I just wanted 2. And so one idea I had was to separate one of the 3 mainline tracks so that it would just look a little bit more, in my eye, prototypical. So those were the 2 things I was kind of after in this otherwise really sort of big module. Here I am building. You can see I started with a 4-footer and decided really quickly that I needed at least 8. And then kind of too late, I decided, oh, it's really got to be bigger than that. It's got to be 12 feet long. And here I am. So here's the kind of the mountain on the right-hand side that's going to have a bridge going over it. That's a scene break. In the middle, you've got the separation of the 3 tracks, so it looks like a double track main line. Then over to the left, here's the big fat river coming together, and that last mountain. If I look down the module, you can see a little bit more, maybe how there's some separation of those mainline tracks. That's what I was kind of after. Today, here the module's kind of back in dry dock as I look at those and rethink, what am I going to do with them? Because what essentially happened was I used these in shows till about 2015, 2016. Then we bought a new car, and they would not fit in the new SUV. We had had a minivan before that. But maybe even more importantly than that, I was growing, and as I began to look at this thing more and more, I began to think, you know, I don't like parts of it anymore. I think I could do better. And I started to get caught up in, I need to fix this, or I need to change that, or I need to start over. And it's kind of been stalled ever since. So it's not clear to me what the next step is yet, but here you get just a sense of this. It's kind of hard to see in the picture just how long 12 feet of modules is sitting in my basement room. Here's just a few pictures from the module. This is that scene break on the right, and I've got a train kind of coming over the bridge there, main line below that. There's a little town in the middle I call Britzerville. It's a couple of trains sort of working through there. And here's a train coming across that big river and over that bridge. This is kind of a scene highlight. This is what kids get drawn to, and adults as well. It's pretty cool watching the trains go over those long bridges. But here is kind of the problem with length as I went from 4 feet to 8 feet to 12 feet. It's complexity. And this isn't scientific, but and maybe it's kind of a joke. No science was employed or harmed in the creation of this hypothesis. But my sense is that complexity is going up much faster than length, and maybe even faster than area. You know, I'm suggesting that complexity is going up is about length squared. So an 8-foot module ends up being 4 times as complex as a 4-foot module, and the 12-foot module is 9 or 10 times Why? Because there is 2 dimensions in area. There's also a 3rd dimension, and there's just more geography, more chance to add things, more complexity in design, and it just kind of spirals up. So length matters a lot. There's another issue with length, and it's kind of flexibility here. This is a quick snapshot of the picture of the first layout that I was a layout coordinator for. And the little building blocks here are the 2x4 standard in-track module. So what I'm trying to show here is that, you know, when we put this layout together, it included in the upper tier a 4-module set that is our yard. Then there's my 12-foot module next to it. On the bottom tier, another 12-foot module set and a 10-foot module set. Now, big long modules like that are really good for the layout coordinator because they help to make the layout big really quickly. But it's kind of inflexible. It's harder to move those big parts around. And I made a mistake in this first one just because I didn't know. The pink modules on the lower left and the red modules both had animation and sound, and they clashed all during that session. Now, we could have figured that out if I'd have known. But in general, I'm just trying to make the point that when you bring a really long module to a layout, you decrease the flexibility of the coordinator, kind of move the pieces around at the last minute, because there's something that always comes up. So that's another issue. But really, the main one, I think, is complexity. So what I would say today is this is what a 2x4 standard plain old 4-footer POFF should look like. 3 tracks in N-track, 2 tracks in HO typically. And I like to say, if you can't start with a plain old 4-footer, you're fired. Somebody ought to give you that strong advice. Start with something small. Build a module, build a diorama, build a shelf layout. Start with something small. That's number 1. All right? Here's lesson number 2. A little flatter is a whole lot gooder. A little flatter is a whole lot gooder. I say peaks and valleys make your life story rich, but they make your module bulky. So we've already seen that, right? I had a big sort of mountainy kind of scene here on the right-hand side. That's bulky, and it's harder to move around. There's the one over on the other side. If you are going to have vertical design elements like mountains and valleys, maybe choose skinnier over fatter. That fat river is kind of a highlight of my module, and it does draw attention. But on the right-hand side, I had kind of a thin one, and that doesn't impact the bulkiness nearly as much. Number 3, and quite related, avoid the weight of the world. Weight is really important, particularly for some of us. Country music singer Toby Keith says, "I'm not as good as I once was," and I think that's true of a lot of us in the hobby. Not everybody now. There's lots of young folks there too. But just think about the weight, because it does get heavier the more you drag it around. Here's another one of my observational hypothesis. Again, no science, just empirical. What I'm suggesting here is if you are 20 years old, having a 40-pound module is not a big deal. And if you're 30 years old, maybe it weighs 30 pounds, still not a big deal. But by the time you get to be 40 or 50, I'm generalizing, you know, you start thinking, hey, I wish this thing weighed a little bit less. And by the time you get to be 60, what you're thinking is, I got to figure out how to make modules that don't weigh hardly anything at all. And then finally, my suggestion is when you get to be 70 years old, your module should weigh nothing, which is another way of saying when you're 70 years old, somebody else ought to carry your module into the show. I did do a couple of things here to try to think about weight. I had that in my mind, but you know, I used dimensional lumber to build this first module. And because I have a little portable planer, I planed all that wood down to about half of its sort of store-bought thickness. And that may have saved a little bit of weight. You can see I drilled some holes, not only for wires, but also to, you know, kind of, I was thinking about weight. Here's what the module leg supports look like. Cut out a little bit more there. But really, those were sort of minor adjustments to weight. I made the thing too heavy through a couple of these kind of mistakes. You can see what I did was I built these mountains just by roughly stacking up foam. And then I slathered in, I like that word slather, I slathered in a whole bunch of Sculptamold. And I didn't realize it, but by the time I got through with all this, I probably had a gallon, maybe half a gallon to a gallon of Sculptamold on this layout. That's heavy. That's heavy. That stuff is sort of, you know, kind of like plaster. Pretty heavy stuff. And what you should do, of course, I think is contour the foam to a little bit more finer degree and then just put a thinner top coat on it. That would make it way less. Here's that water feature again. And yes, it's nice. I really kind of like the way it turned out, but that's Envirotex, and it's probably, I don't know, an inch thick or so. And so by the time I poured that in a space that's about 2 feet by 2 feet, that's a big heavy slab of Envirotex, and it's very, very heavy, that module. All right, number 4, make your track part perfect. You know, all of this about scenery and the way it looks is secondary when you're building a module to go into a group layout, to having the community track, the track that's going to be shared, just work perfectly. Or another way of thinking is the best design and executed plan, the best, prettiest module that has track work on it that doesn't work, is just not going anywhere. So the track part is super perfect. And to be honest, I think I did pretty well there. The track on my module runs well. It's got good electrical connectivity. I rarely have any trouble with it. I made 2 mistakes along the way. The first is that on either end of this 12-foot module, and I'm not sure exactly how that happened, but ever so short, ever so too short are, you know, my tracks end about an 1/8 of an inch too short. And again, I don't know exactly how that happened, but that's quite irritating because the joiner tracks are pretty standard sizes and mine are a little bit too long. So I have to have special tracks. And if I lose those, I'm cutting flex track as we're trying to get the show up and running. So lesson there would be to make really careful and be really sure that you're getting that measured out exactly perfectly before you cut it. So that was a mistake I made that I'd like to do over again. The other is that I've got 2 interior joints because the module's in 3 pieces. And these interior joints, they could easily have been butt jointed. And because they're all connector tracks, even on the sidings, you know, I spend a lot of time putting connectors in. And this is my least favorite part of being a modular model railroader, is spending all that time connecting those tracks together before the show. So that was a clear mistake. And that's part of why you can see this has sort of got some new sculpted mold on it and some things that are changing, because I'm redoing that piece so that I can then butt those together. And that will at least reduce a whole bunch of the joints. All right, number 5, pack it up, don't glue it down. Why do I say that? Well, I think you should take everything you can off your module and take it with you and then reassemble it when you get there. And here's why: because if it can fall off and break, bend, drop, flop, plop, crash, smash, dash, shatter, splatter, or otherwise cause itself to become partially or completely ruined, it will, especially if it's expensive. That's what I learned. In fact, I learned it on my very first trip out to Springfield, my very first big show. I took one of the modules outside, realized that I didn't have the car keys and needed to go back inside. I set the module up on its axis on the long end. It was a beautiful, clear, still day in January in the winter. Went back in, came back out, and of course the module had fallen over in a little breeze or a gust, and it had gone pepperoni side down. Well, that module had a whole bunch of handmade trees on it. And you can see now I've got something that looks more akin to a clear-cut forest. Well, lesson learned. Lesson learned. Better to have pieces that you can take off and then reassemble when you get there. My friend Shaq Haralambu said it this way. He said, a module is a model train layout that goes for a car ride. Think about that. This is like taking your railroad out of your basement or out of your bonus room or out of the attic and taking it for a car ride. So we got to think differently about modular railroading. It's not the same thing as our home layout. This is a model train layout that goes for a car ride. It needs to be a whole lot more robust. So I pack everything up in these sort of plastic storage bins. You can see sort of there. You can take the smaller structures maybe and glue them onto a substrate. That's what I'm playing around with here, so that you don't have to place each one of them, but you can place sort of a group of them together. An additional advice, make sure you buy some stock and Sterlite or Rubbermaid, because you end up with a ton of these plastic bins. But I think that's kind of the right way to do it. Keeps everything a lot more safe, a lot less breakage, and things don't sort of wander off either. Number 6, nothing beats a great pair of legs. Well, legs for me are really an interesting piece of modular building, and an area that there's a whole lot that you can do in terms of design consideration. In fact, there are so many different kinds of legs today, everything from rough cut 2x4s to really nicely milled 2x2s to PVC pipe to metal tubing, from the plumbing section, and all kinds of fittings and fixtures and 3D printed accessories. There's a bunch of things that can get into leg design. And I know why, because it's super, super important in terms of enjoyment to get that right. These are what my legs look like, sort of my first attempts here. They're pretty much, I think I used 2x4s and sawed them into 2x2s. And, not much beyond that. And they are a pain to kind of screw in and adjust and all of that. And so I want to do much better the next time. Ideally, I think the best solution for me would be to have fold up legs. I just haven't quite figured out how to do that yet. So what happens in the show is this, I say somebody tells you, just get down on your hands and knees and turn that nut, the one at the bottom underneath the leg that's upside down. It's kind of frozen up and it's ground into the floor, and it needs to go a half a turn counterclockwise, but that's clockwise because it's upside down. All of that. Really, the legs have become kind of the boon of my life as well. So here's what I did on the new module: simple leg pockets, no screwing them in. You just cram them up there, hand twist these legs. They really only need to hold the leg tight enough to get the thing standing up, and then then it ends up all clamped together as well. So that's piece of it. On the bottom, I have a fixture, which I don't have a picture of, that doesn't sort of glue into the bottom of the leg, but glues onto the side of the leg, so that adjustment is much, much easier. Number 7, lone wolves are alone, and lone wolves are often lonely. Well, I'm going to say it even more emphatically. If you're doing model railroading by yourself, you're doing it wrong. Now, you may disagree with me. And if you are, I get that, because I was like that for a long time too. And again, I'm not a really kind of super social person. So it wasn't obvious to me 10 years ago that I needed a lot of interaction with other people. Yes, I needed to learn from people, but I wasn't sure that I needed to hang out with people. In fact, isn't the hobby of model railroading started about getting away from everything and spending time by yourself, building your own miniature world? Well, there's obviously some truth to that, but I've also learned that it is just so much more, that the hobby is so rich when we connect with others and when we share our love for trains and such. And so connecting with the gang is a big part of it. And it's kind of strange. In this super crazy year that we've had, connection and connectivity has in some ways grown quite rapidly, right? We have NERx now. We have so much that you can do with social media on Facebook and YouTube. I've been getting into myself a lot of listening to podcasts. There are now Zoom sessions in a bunch of different groups. It's just a whole lot of new ways to connect with the gang while we wait to be able to get back together physically. And this just really explodes my enjoyment of the hobby in so many different directions. First of all, you get to ask for help, right? You get to connect with other people who can help you get started, get going, and make progress. That was very, very important to me. Don't find yourself kind of out here on the ledge, making mistakes, when you have other people around you that can help, and you can help them as well. It kind of goes both ways. Here's a picture that sort of shows that, the one I always show and tell the story. I bought this roll of wire, I think it was 100 feet of 12 gauge wire. Now the Intrac standard is for 12 gauge bus wire, and that's pretty robust and kind of expensive. That 100 feet of wire cost me, I think, between $50 and $75. On the right is the piece that I ripped out of those modules after I realized I had used the wrong kind. I had wired the whole thing up with solid core bus wire, and that's not right for a bus wire, is it, right? You want solid core feeders dropping down because they don't move and they conduct really well. But for the bus wire, you got to use sort of a twisted wire because you're going to move the ends around as you connect it and disconnect it from modules. So lesson learned the hard way. Probably could have saved myself, $50, $75 if I had asked one more question or asked for help. Here is a picture of my certificate of achievement in the NMRA for volunteer. I'm kind of showing that because I'm kind of proud of it, because not only is the social aspect about getting help from other people, but also supporting the hobby and helping others as well. So that's been enriching for me too. I've been now the president of the Northeastern region of the NMRA for 6 years, and it's kind of a big highlight of the hobby for me. Sometimes it means that I'm doing that instead of building these modules or building something else, but that's okay because it kind of comes and goes in seasons. This has, again, been a highlight for me. All right, let me change and now tell you a little bit about these sort of new modules. And I ask you to still be kind, right? I'm still learning. Here was my givens and druthers, what I really wanted to get out of this new Take Two module set. I wanted flexible length. You know, I wanted to be able to come to the show with a small part or a larger part, depending upon what the coordinator needed. I wanted interchangeable parts. I wanted to be able to take the pieces of the module and move them around left to right. I couldn't do that with my 12-foot set. It had to be in the right order. I wanted these to be super lightweight. I wanted them to be flat if possible, or at least less bulky, have really durable scenery, and be easy to set up. Here's what that plan looks like. So my new modules have a 2x4, the black box, which is a plain old 4-footer, right? Then I have a 3-foot standard corner, and then I have an 8-foot module, which comes in these 2 parts. And the idea here, and the scenery kind of goes across all of them in a way that allows me to move them around without having the scenery break. They kind of fit together in all the different combinations. And this allows me to bring to the show either a 3-foot layout, a 4-foot, a 7-foot, an 8, 11, a 12, or a 15-foot long kind of connection. So just move them around, bring what you need, whatever the layout coordinator needs. So that was kind of the idea, and that's the way I designed these. Now, management guru Peter Drucker said a long time ago, even the most grandiose of strategies must eventually degenerate into work. In other words, eventually you got to quit talking and start doing. Here I am with those first 2 modules. This is the plain old 4-footer and the standard 3-foot corner. And I'm laying cork here, getting ready to lay track. Quick picture of what it looks like today. Track is down and kind of weathered. Feeders are dropped. I built 15, I think, of these Walthers or DPM kits, kind of arranging those. Most of this module set will be industrial, so the ground will either be asphalt or concrete. So, you know, that's going to be pretty easy to paint before too long. So within the next month or so, I expect to be up and running with these new first 2 pieces, the 4-footer and the 3-foot corner. I've got some other plans along the way and some other things I want to do. Here's a picture of a T-track layout. I'd like to mess around with this a little bit this winter as well. I think tabletop model railroading has a bright future, and I want to sort of play with that a little bit. I'm also looking to build a Fremo N-scale module. This is a set of modules that's about 25 feet long. It's a engine yard facility, and it's designed to help me achieve civil engineering and electrical engineering in the NMRA's achievement program. So I have some plans, right? I've got some things sort of written down. I've wrestled with them a lot, and they're kind of ready to get the saw out and start cutting lumber. Planning to make a plan is not a plan. Planning to make a plan is not a plan. Eventually, you got to get it down on paper. You got to commit to something. You got to get going. But as Eisenhower once said, plans are nothing and planning is everything. In other words, a plan is super important, but the plan isn't the thing. Planning is a thing, because what's going to happen is you're going to make mistakes. You're going to change along the way. You're going to realize some of your assumptions didn't work. And so you've got to be in the process of continuing to think ahead about what it is you want, but don't get stuck too much in planning and don't get stuck in too much in doing without planning. Turns out, and many of you know this, but I'm learning that model railroading is a process, that the quote unquote mistakes you make are really a part of kind of the learning. And there's, in some sense, you can't really avoid those. You have to make some of the mistakes along the way. Good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. Good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. So you're going to have some oops. That's okay. You just figure out what you learned from that and move forward. Here's a recap of my 7 take 2 lessons learned from building that first module set. Number 1, always start small and then start smaller again. Remember, if you can't start with a diorama or a shelf layout or a plain old 4-footer, you should be fired. You got somebody ought to beat you over the head and make you again start small. Number 1, always start small. Number 2, make it flat or less bulky. Don't make something that you're going to take to a train show, have a whole bunch of mountainous scenery. It's beautiful, but save that for your home layout. Make something that's flat or less bulky. Number 3, the lighter it is, the better. Make it as light as possible. Kind of think you're like a backpacker would, right? Remove all the extraneous things. You don't have to go nuts about it, but just make sure you don't make those mistakes I did, like putting a whole bunch of Sculptamold or a whole bunch of Envirotex or any other thing in there that is really heavy. Number 4, make sure the track work is perfect. This is the reason why you have a module, so that you can put it into a big layout. It needs to be operational. It needs to run really well. So take the time, go slow, make sure the track work is bulletproof. Number 5, better to pack it up rather than to glue it down. Pack up the pieces and take those in bins. Put it all together when you get there. That part's really easy as long as you don't have to install things. You're basically just setting it out there. Pack up the pieces. Number 6, think about easy assembly when it comes to legs. They don't have to hold on to too much weight, because in a modular layout, the thing's all clamped together, but they got to be sturdy enough to get the thing standing up. Fold up legs or legs that are easier to get together really, really quickly is an important part of enjoying. And 7, do it with others. The more you interact with other people, help other people, get help from other people, the more social you think about this hobby, quite oftentimes, the more fun you're going to have doing it. So what's it going to be for you and me? Are we going to be armchair railroaders and spend lots and lots of time thinking but not doing? Or are we going to join this list here of rail barons in history, right? Gold and Harriman and Vanderbilt and Morgan and Carnegie and John Doring, and maybe you too, right? And as Yogi Berra reminded us, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. When you come to a fork in the road, take it. In other words, do your best job, analyze what you need to, make a decision, commit to it. Sometimes it's going to work, sometimes it isn't. It's not the end of the world. It's part of the process. My dreams do keep growing as I think about all these modules I'm building, N-track modules, T-track modules, Fremo N-scale modules, maybe in other scales. I do have a secret love of ON30 modeling, but I'm not going to tell anybody about it. My dreams keep growing, so it started to occur to me, you know, I'm going to need to get back and forth from and to the show in style. So this is what my dream ride looks like right now. Finally, I'll leave you with this last thought. This is something that I believe so much in my heart of hearts. We come together through our shared love for trains, but we stay together through our shared love for one another. Thanks for listening. I appreciate your attention. If I can help you in any way, please reach out to me at john@jdoring.com. That's john@jdoring.com. Stay safe, be well. Talk to you soon. Bye now.
Well, that was a very, very, very nice clinic there, Santa Self. You look so, dapper in your elf hat. So anyway, let's move on. We do have a few questions for you if you're up to taking some questions.
Sure.
Okay. So the first one comes in is a question that one of the viewers feels they may have missed. What made you decide to model N-scale?
Let's see. N-scale goes all the way back to the mid to late 70s for me. And I switched over as I was preparing to go to college and thinking that I wasn't going to have any space. And right around that time, the Comback book on the Clinchfield Railroad came out. And that was the first time I got a chance to see, hey, you can really do something in N-scale. I didn't get very far. I got some bench work built, but I didn't get very far. And that was probably good because N-scale back then didn't run very well at all. And it would have been quite discouraging. But I think most N-scalers probably because of space. Yeah.
That was it. Okay, good.
Yeah.
What type of module would you suggest a new modeler build?
For if you're going to build a module, what you want to do is find a module group, right? So
That sounds
generally,
like a good idea.
you want to build a module in the context of a group or a club. So I would find the club first, because different clubs are going to have different standards, and you're going to have to sort of enjoy it, working and playing with the people in that particular club. And there's a lot of them around. So, I guess depending upon what scale you're in, you can either be using a 2 or 3 track standard that kind of goes around in a loop, like the hub layout or the in-track layout, or both in and HO now have pretty good Fremo standards and groups around. So I would pick the group first. That's what I would. Yeah.
That makes sense. Makes
Yeah.
also. So why haven't you built an HO module yet?
I don't like any of the guys in HO, and that HO is horribly oversized. That's what that stands for.
Oh, well, anyway, next question is, if you don't have the tools or space to do the bench work or carpentry stuff, how would you suggest somebody builds a module?
Yeah, I hear that one a lot, that people are kind of either intimidated or stuck because they can't do that. So if you join with a group or a club, like your local NMRA division, you're going to find people around you that you can kind of trade skills. I know you do that a lot, Jerry, right? It's like,
Oh yeah, all the time.
certain people in the club that are really good at that. They've got the space, they've got the equipment, and you're going to be good at something else. And you just kind of trade around. And that's part of the power of working together in a group. The other option, particularly in N-Scale, is you can buy kits for tabletop modeling and T-Track, and that's another way to sort of do the benchwork piece if you don't have the experience or skills. I would just say, like so many other things in this hobby, ask around and ask for help.
Yeah, I know. For example, our division hub, we do offer kits, everything pre-cut and everything else for the person who doesn't have or doesn't want to spend the money just to get everything you need to do
Yeah.
it. In that regard, and we, it's a reason. It's for the cost of what the hub has to pay for the materials and everything.
That's a particularly good kit because it includes track and wiring and all those other things as well. Yeah.
Okay, another one is, wouldn't fold up legs actually be the easiest solution?
Fold up legs?
Yeah.
A lot of people use those, and I sort of thought that would be the right solution for me too, and I just kind of punted because I didn't learn exactly how to do that. There's a little more hardware involved in putting a fold up leg on. And the other thing I noticed carrying modules for other people is that when you have fold up legs, then the legs and the module are together, so that's now heavier. Whereas if you pull the legs out of pockets, then you get to carry them separately. So I don't know if I think it's pretty elegant. There's no question that fold up legs is probably the easiest way to get standing up. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Another question we have here is, why are you thinking about both N-Track and Fremo modules? They don't match up, do they?
Yeah, right. I think that the short answer is that I have a super big case of ADHD, and I never see anything I don't want to do. The more nuanced answer is they serve two different purposes. N-Track is really, really good for showing off to the public. So that's part of our outreach mission, right? And so N-Track is really good at just having a lot of trains running. And also N-Track is a good standard for coming to a show and running 100-car train, something that you just can't do at home.
Right.
But the Fremo ethic is a lot more about building something that's more prototypical, kind of a higher modeling standard, and designed for operation. So they kind of scratch two different itches. Whether or not I should be doing both at the same time, I'm not sure that I should, but that's what I'm doing.
Very good. And last question I have here is, where and how do you store your modules?
Oh, good question. I saw a slideshow early on, and a fellow had said, "Be careful about these things. They have a tendency to populate."
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and next thing you know, you got them all over the place. So, having seen that and chuckled about that, I actually built a shelf in my garage that's raised above the cars. So everything kind of goes into that little loft space. But it is something to think about because it's very easy to design on paper. Say, I'm going to build this set that's going to be 20 feet long. Next thing you know, it's a lot to figure out where you're going to put it. And mine are in the basement right now, and I'm not too, there's some people that aren't so happy about that right at the moment.
I can imagine that. But you say that, I happen to have a garage that's 25 by 25 feet, which is a pretty decent sized garage. I do actually have a rack in the garage where my modules sit, because I don't use them anywhere else except for shows. So I want them close to the car.
Yeah, that's a good idea too. But also someplace where they're not getting moved around or hit or
Right.
sort of beaten up and that. Yeah, good.
So super. Well, again, thank you very much. I think this was a great evening presentation for the group, and we had some great questions.
Yeah.
And so, at this point, I'd say thank you again very much for your participation, John.
Thank you, and thanks everybody. Nice bow tie.
You like that, huh? Well, welcome back again, and move on to our next presentation. It's a layout tour. But before we do that, just got one quick thing. My friend John Henry Lowe wanted to know where my bow tie was. Hey, John, I don't wear ties, period. Anyway, moving on, we've got Victor Hand's HO scale New York Central Hudson and Electric Division, which is prototype based. The layout is set in the 1950s and features steam, diesel, and electric locomotives. The layout is 1,800 square feet with nearly a quarter of the scenery complete. So let's visit Victor's New York Central layout.
Hello, my name's Victor Hand. I've been a model railroader since 1951 when my dad bought some HO trains for my brother and I. My brother lost interest in about 2 weeks, but I've stayed at it for 69 years. When I was a kid, I lived in New York City, and of course I became familiar with the New York Central. I used to haunt Grand Central Terminal. I also take railroad photographs, and I go up to Montreal or Toronto to look at the Canadian Pacific and Canadian National steam engines, and of course I rode the New York Central, so I became aware of the New York Central at an early age. When I got out of law school, I went to work as a fireman on the New York Central, working out of Rochester, New York on the Syracuse Division. Later on I got into management. It was Penn Central by then, but I worked at an awful lot of New York Central locations. My favorite, of course, was the New York area, Grand Central and Harmon. I worked there for a number of months with the track department at one point. And I knew even then that I wanted to model the Harmon area. I thought it was just the greatest place in the world. It's a location where the New York Central changed locomotives for trains coming with electrics out of New York. And they put the steam or the diesel locomotives on. I'm modeling the area from Harmon to Cold Spring, which is mileposts 32 to 54. I'm trying to do it as it existed in the early 1950s, as accurately as I can. I have literally thousands of photographs that I use to build models as accurate as I can make them. I have two friends who are modeling the same area, and they've been very helpful in trading information with me, and one of them is a architect who knows how to design 3D stuff, and we've done a lot of 3D parts. We'll show you some of those later on. This is the first location we'll start our walking tour. This is my staging yard. This is not a modeled scene. There are two staging yards here. There's a 8-track yard that represents Grand Central. Grand Central, of course, had 55 tracks, but I don't need that many. The 4 tracks nearest us represent the West Side freight yards, and they're longer tracks, of course, for freight trains. I can stage quite a few trains here. We've got the Harlem Milk sitting here on the first track, and 2 freight trains, and then we got a 20th Century Limited and a set of streamline cars, and then there's a looks like a Poughkeepsie local behind that. In any event, I stage trains here, and then we come out into the real world at the next scene. We'll show you that in a second. Okay, here's the first modeled scene. When I lived in the city, I had a smaller model railroad because my house was a lot smaller, and I couldn't fit an electric division scene in. When I moved to Maine, I had 6 times as much space, so of course everything got bigger, and I decided I wanted a scene on the electric division. Spuyten Duyvil was one of my favorite places when I was in college. I went to college up near there. I used to go down and watch the trains at night. It was a terrific place with the Henry Hudson Bridge, and spectacular location. It's the location of a wreck a few years ago that killed 4 people. There's a 30-mile-an-hour curve that this guy went around at 82, I think. In any event, what you're looking at here is my provisional model of the Henry Hudson Bridge. It's shortened. It's 560 feet long, where the real one's 800 feet long. Hopefully I'll live long enough to be able to build a detailed model of this bridge. I've been collecting parts for it. A lot of commercial parts are usable. But station from the west side here, with that signal and the footbridge. Here's a photograph showing that scene back in 1962 that I took when I was in school. It reappears at the Croton River Bridge at Harmon. This model is a finished model. If you get some close-ups of it later on, you'll see it's got pretty good detail. It took me a couple of months to build. The model of the coal dock at Harmon was a huge structure. It existed from 1912 to about 1954. It had 30 pockets. I modeled it as 24 pockets just to shorten it a little bit. It's still 8 feet long, got about 6,500 parts in it. And my friend Larry Faulkner is also building a model of it, but he's doing it in styrene. I elected to use wood. I think wood weathers better, looks good. The trestle leading up to it was designed as a double-track trestle, but it opens up with a switch. As I said, this had 30 pockets and it serviced 70 or 80 locomotives a day when it was busy. Here we have the foundations for a 25-stall roundhouse. The real one was 31 stalls. Here's an aerial photograph of it. And the way I made this foundation, I took Walther's kits. They make a roundhouse, but they had 10-degree spacing on the tracks, which of course would have put the roundhouse very close to the turntable, would not have looked right. So I set up a jig and I cut everything down to 7.5-degree spacing, which is what is required for a 48-stall circular roundhouse. I had to sanded the things. I had to work to 1/1000th of an inch, but I got it all together and it looks pretty good. The next problem, of course, will be building the building, but that's another day's work. Side of Harmon now. This is the passenger facilities where engines were changed. This building here is a detailed model of the electric inspection shed, where electric engines had their brakes checked and just light repairs between each trip. It was built in 1912 and burned to the ground in 1960. Quite a building. It was written up in Railroad Model Craftsman. Took me a couple of months to build. You'll see the platforms. There are 22 feet of platforms. They were staggered for eastbound and westbound trains. I haven't put the platform shelters in yet, and the umbrella roofs. This is Oscawana Station. Now this is almost a finished scene. It's got the station building, which is scratch built. That footbridge and combination signal bridge is scratch built. All the little structures. There's a B&B building there, and I've also started scenery, my first attempt at scenery. The forest is coming along pretty good, I think. A lot more trees. I still have to put water in the two lagoons, and I've got to put gravel on the road. Otherwise, this scene is pretty much done. There's more telegraph poles to go in as well. Here and lights, and you can now make tiny little LED lights for these gooseneck lamps, so it's pretty good. The intertrack fence was quite a project to get wire small enough to look right. This is my version of Oscawana Tunnel, which is quite distinctive. When they four-tracked the railroad in 1912, they built the second tunnel, and then they enlarged the first one, and it has this concrete face on it with a big curve. There's a section house right in front of it, signal, telltales. The scene came out pretty nice, I think. I'm still working on the scenery. The lagoon is not filled with water yet. I've never done water, so I have to figure it out. The west end of Oscawana Tunnel, which was more conventional portals, rock faces, a telltale scenery on top of the hill. Here's a prototype scene from the 1940s. Notice there's no vegetation on top of the hill today. It's all forested, of course. Full panel for the Harmon complex, which is quite a few tracks. I have every track that was in Harmon. They're shortened, of course. It had to be. But all the tracks are there in the station area. And there are lots of machinery under the table to make all these switches work. As you can see, the control panel is fairly complex. These are diode matrices that allow me to throw what I call standard routes, where I can throw lots of switches all at once. When HM Tower, which this represents, was in service, there were 4 men running the place 24 hours a day. I'm by myself, so I've sort of cheated. I've put in what I call standard routes. If I press this button, it'll line me from the loop track up to track 3. You'll see that threw about 8 switches at one time. The system works pretty well. I can mainline everything. If I press a button, I can come out of track 2 on the main line, and everything will be automatically set up, because trying to set switches manually was more than one man could handle. Film this here. These are my power supplies. There's a DCC system. It's the NCE system, which works very nicely. And then there's 7 or 8 different power supplies for different purposes. There's a capacitor discharge unit, which throws my switch machines. There's a power supply for signals. There's one for lighting. There's one for tortoise switch machines, which require a different power supply than the other switch machines I have. Now we can talk about switch machines. When I started model railroading a long time ago, you had these twin coil machines, and they were terrible things. So I started hunting around, and I've developed a machine based on telephone relays, which the telephone company was getting rid of at the time. There were billions of them around. I picked some up surplus, and I invented this machine, which I call the perfect switch machine. It was written up in Model Railroader in 1978. And what it is a telephone relay, and it throws and then switches over to a 24-volt current to hold it in place, and then when you release the current, it springs back, and the big relay there is the release relay. It doesn't have to be that big, but that's what I happen to have around. They were cheap, so I used them. There's 150 of these things on the railroad, and they've been dependable for 40 years. They've been in several layouts. Haven't had any fail in all that time, although the linkages break sometimes. I've run out of these things, so I've gone to a tortoise system, which they're pretty good switch machines. The problem with the tortoise is you can't throw it from more than one place, and it's incompatible with the diode matrix, which I use on all my standard routes. So once again, I designed a little circuit, which you'll see here for them, that makes the tortoise compatible with a capacitor discharge system, and all the machines can be thrown at the same time in standard routes, and it works very well. Those take about an hour to build each, and there's a bunch of them. Every tortoise that has a standard route needs one. If you only have to throw it from one spot, you don't have to worry about that. You just do it the normal way. These buildings are castings made by my friend Manuel Duran, who's the architect who knows how to do 3D things. He designs them in 3D, has a 3D printed, and they're pretty expensive, and then he reproduces them. He's provided me with models of a couple of towers and circuit breaker houses and battery houses that were all standard New York Central Electric Division things. Here's a photograph of CR Tower, That's this one. It needs to be painted, windows installed, and the masking will be pretty interesting, but these are all waiting to get painted. As an example of the kind of stuff that you can do in the 3D printing, here's a stairway for this tower. That's one piece. It is absolutely beautiful. We've got a clear signal that'll turn the red when you pass it. Now when you hit the next signal, which is clear, that'll turn to yellow. These are automatic clocks. I like the flashing signal. Yeah. That's good. That is a beautiful passenger platform. On main tracks, you don't want to use the magnetic ramps, the fixed ones, because you get false uncouplings. So I went through 3 iterations of trying to invent my own, where I had things rising ramps, couldn't get it to work right. Rapido came out with one that works like a charm, and it's got 2 little magnets, and they turn instead of rise.
Okay.
So when they turn the other way, they don't work. When they turn that way, they do. I put about 18 of them in, and they work very nicely.
Oh, excellent.
57. Yeah. It's 110 mile long catch road. See that signal graph? It's going up for years.
Welcome back, and thank you for sharing your layout with us. That was quite impressive. So moving along in the trying to get ourselves a little bit more caught up and back on schedule. Our next clinician is a professional woodworker and lifelong model railroader. A native of Western New York, he draws inspiration from the Erie, Lackawanna, and Quincy, and very short lines of northern Pennsylvania. While he works primarily in N scale, he also dabbles in other scales and can't seem to quit his love for his old American Flyer that he grew up with. So with that, we welcome Jeff Faust. Good evening, Jeff.
Good evening, everyone. So I'd like to talk a little bit about making a layout happen. Just like the last hour, a very interesting comment. Let's just build something. Now then, that's easier said than done, right? We all have these fantasies about how worlds we want to build, just the right basic to show underneath us. And, maybe that happens, or maybe it doesn't. I think John's advice just about something, is is a good thing to keep. So those of us who have been in the hobby for a certain length of time, we're probably influenced in our earlier but that kind of spaghetti track planning was a lot more than the 1960s and 70s. This is one of my favorites here. Look at that. That's that's a lot of HO scale to back up 9 foot space. And on paper, that looks really enticing. Something about that. Now, that's not exactly a beginner project. You've got track on several different levels, spiraling its way up and back down. You've got a lot of tight curves. You've got clusters and turnouts. And electronics to make that function the way it ought to. Yes.
Just turn your camera, the camera button. Just click the camera button.
Well, it doesn't have a button.
Underneath in the Whereby screen, below your photo, there's a camera button or a camera icon.
Okay, there. How's that? Okay. So that's not a beginner's type of project. It'd take a lot to make that work, a lot to make that run the way it should. And yeah, once you start thinking about how to make something like that a reality, it gets pretty intimidating. So that leads us to the Inglenook. It was designed as a switching puzzle, and it's about as simple a layout as you can get. Which is why I love it. It was developed by a British developer by the name of Alan Wright in 1979. The whole story is on the Highland info website. I've got a link to it in the handout that accompanies the book tonight. The short story is that he was asked to bring a layout to an exhibit. He didn't have anything planned, but he did have a few pieces of track and a 1x4 foot board, and he put this together in a very short time. Brought to the show, and that was it. And the rest is history. But as you see by the diagram here, there's really not a lot to it. It's 2 turnouts, 4 pieces of flex track that don't even have to flex. So you have a main line, you have 2 sidings, you have a switch lead. The lengths are sized according to the rolling stock that you're running, and they have very specific capacities. There's cars that in a locomotive go on the layout, and there's space. All told, if you count all the spaces where you can put a car, there's room for 14 cars. Now, trying to put 14 cars in the move. 8 provides plenty of challenge there. You could use it just as a small shelf layout, but it was designed as a switching puzzle. So the challenge is you've got 8 cars there. You choose 5 of those cars at random and make up the train in the order that you've chosen. So choosing 5 cars out of 8, that's 6,720 possible permutations there. You think all the different orders that they could be placed in. And every one of those permutations can be solved. Sometimes I've had people come up and look at this layout and say, "Oh, I can't do this. Let me just pick the car up and put it there." It's like, no, you don't need to do that. You can get there from here. It can be done. Relax. Haven't run into a combination yet that couldn't be moved by the locomotive. So why would you want to consider building a layout like this? Well, it's again, it's real simple. You can't get much simpler than this. you know, and it makes for a pretty small layout too. So if space is an issue for you, you know, you can probably find a place to fit this somewhere in the house. If you're building this as an HO scale layout with 40-foot cars, you can do it in 6 feet. I'm doing it in 7 feet just to have a little length in case a longer locomotive shows up. But really, I'm only using 6 feet of my layout. You know, because there's so little that goes into the layout, you know, it makes it easy to make this a budget project, you know, if money is constraint for you. And because this is not just a Christmas tree loop, you know, you're actually switching cars. It's a great way to get a taste of what prototypical operation, you know, can be like for you. You know, find out if you know, if it's going to be your thing or not. Rather than try and fill up a basement empire and then get to a certain point and discover that, well, maybe that's not your cup of tea. Build an Inglenook, test out, you know, whether you like the idea or not. You know, you've got very little out of pocket, very little time invested in it, and if you're enjoying yourself, you can go from there. If you want to build that into a larger layout later, that's easy to do. Unlike, say, a starter 4x8 set where, you know, you're putting an 18-inch radius curve there, try and build that into the empire later, and you want to run 85-foot passenger cars, something like that. You know, squeezing your original work into a later project poses some challenges. With an Inglenook, you know, it's easy to do. You put it off to one side of the layout, no problem. And you know, it's the really, you know, the big plus of an Inglenook design is that the barrier to entry is so low. You're only talking one pair of turnouts. You're only talking 5 sets of rail joiners. You know, if you haven't worked with flexible track before, this is the easiest way you're ever going to get into playing with flex track. You don't even have to flex it. You know, each piece can stay perfectly straight. When it comes time to build up the rolling stock fleet, you know, 9 pairs of couplers to maintain, adjust, lubricate, make function. There's no curves to contend with. There's no grades to contend with. It's all perfectly level. You hook up 1 pair of wires from your power supply, you've done the electrical. You know, there's a lot to like there. So, you've decided to take a shot at one of these. A few things to keep in mind as you're planning it out. And the nice things about the Inglenook is, you know, because all the sidings, both the sidings, are trailing point, you don't have to worry about a runaround. The locomotive doesn't even need a front coupler. So if I want to build an Inglenook based on my American Flyer and run a K5 steam locomotive to run it, there's no barrier to me doing that. You know, it could be done. When you're trying to plan out the length, you want to plan it around the rolling stock you're planning to use. So the capacities, like you saw in the earlier diagram, 5 cars on the main line, 3 cars plus the locomotive on the switch lead, 3 cars each on the siding. Now, when you figure out those lengths, you want to leave a little extra room for the uncoupler. So as you see in the photo here, when all the cars are up against the bumper at the far end of the string, car is a couple of inches in from the magnet, so that you can bring the locomotive up and couple on. Now, if you've tried to cut it a little bit too close, and the end of the car is hanging over the magnet, and you can't push it past, makes it impossible to couple on. That's going to complicate things. The simplest way to tackle that is to run all your sidings a little bit long, you know, figure out where the bumper needs to go in order to make everything fit the way you'd like. And once that's all settled, you can chop the track off short and on you go. If you're looking to make a scenic project out of this, in addition to a functional puzzle, if you want a little extra depth for scenic features or structures, nothing to stop you there. The layout itself needs very little depth. And if you're really tight on space, I've left the back siding on mine straight, just for simplicity's sake. But if you need to bend that a little more parallel, just as long as you're not doing it so sharp that coupling onto a car parked on it becomes a problem. But if you need to curve that back to save yourself a little space, not difficult to do. As you're building, the standard rules for good model railroad practice apply. You want a smooth, flat sub-road bed. If it's lumpy or twisted or warped, you're going to pay for it sooner or later. It's easy enough to find some sheet goods that lay reasonably flat, frame it up into something reasonably stiff. Because you're not contending with grades or anything that poses carpentry challenges here, this should be pretty easy to do. As you're laying the track, take your NMRA gauge, make sure that everything is laying out properly. I had to do a little bit of tweaking on the track on my Inglenook as I went, but it was easily done, and it paid for itself in good operation. Same thing with electrical. I went through and as I laid the track, tested each and every piece of rail for continuity. Each rail either had a feeder soldered onto it or was soldered to the rail joiner, via rail joiner, to an adjoining rail that did have a feeder. Now you can see in the lower close-up on this photo here, I've got a couple of outlet snap switches. And you know how they are, the rivets tend to be kind of sloppy. They don't always get up as well as they should. So I put a couple feeders on the points, as you can see in the picture there. And, just a good use for some of those little bits of 30 gauge wire that I snipped off the decoders during the installation. I saved them for a reason, but they make a very nice feeder for the points. You can use whatever power you like. If you want to run this with power cab, that's fine. I started out, when I initially got it going, just plugging a regular DC pack in. Rolling stock, like I mentioned earlier, you want to build the layout around the rolling stock that you're planning to use, because 40-foot cars are going to call for a different siding length than 50-foot cars. So I went through and I collected a bunch of 40-foot rolling stock. There's a few 36-foot cars in there, but nothing that's going to have an impact on clearances at turnouts or at uncoupling magnets. Everything plays pretty nicely together. So because I built my Inglenook for exhibit purposes, I went through and chose as many different colored cars as I could. And I made an interesting discovery along the way. This is my first HO scale project here. And I discovered that you could get Adam blue box freight cars in pretty much every color of the rainbow, including gold. You look around for long enough on show tables, there is a dazzling variety of cars. So no two of them have to look anything alike, which makes operation for people unfamiliar with reporting marks or car numbers a very simple matter. And one of the things I like about doing this is, because it's just a small, simple, fun project. In my normal hobby activities, I tend to be a bit of a rivet counter. I'll look for a car to show and hold it up and look for the reweigh date and say, yeah, that's 5 years too late for my ear up. Sorry. With this, I can be relaxed about it. Car looks distinctive and I like it, if it appeals to me, I can do it. And I can have way too much fun doing it. And so can you. There's so many cars out there, and you probably already have too many anyway, but hey, this is a good excuse to get yourself some more. So on the top row, you can do a set of beverage themed cars. If you like beer reefers, hey, here's your opportunity to put them to use. Middle row, various consumer products, both actual cars and imaginary ones. I strongly suspect that Black & Decker did not, have a boxcar decorated with a girl on it, but I think Model Power or Tyco manufactured that in the 70s, and hey, it's a fun-looking car. The bottom row is a color theme, all these boxcars. And you'll also notice another theme running through the cars you see on this slide. As I got a Western New York thing going here, between Kodak, Benzine, Wyoming, and the Arcade in Attica. When I take these cars to shows, those are names that people around here are very familiar with. So that will start some good conversation. So mechanical standards. This layout, like I said, 8 cars, 1 locomotive. There's no good excuse not to make everything as perfect as you can. You've got such a limited scope here that you can lavish attention on this stuff. So get out the coupler gauge, make sure everything's tuned up proper height, make sure it swings nice and freely without being sloppy. Put a little squirt of graphite in there, make sure it works freely. And it's an achievable goal to have a railroad that runs perfectly with this. The Inglenook isn't going to take over your life. Wheel gauge, that's another thing where you may not think that it matters much with a fairly simple layout, but I've had stuff that I've gotten where something's out of gauge and it'll catch on a guardrail, or bobble a little bit, or not be coupled properly. And you find the problem with the gauge, fix it. It's not difficult to do. It just takes a little time and patience, and you can get stuff that runs pretty perfect. Weight is another thing that I find makes a difference. Manufactured ready to run cars tend to run on the light side of NMRA weight standards I've found. That's particularly true in N scale, but I'm also finding it with the weight show. So you put it on a scale. I've got like a cheap battery powered hard freight scale I picked up for a few bucks. See how the car compares with the recommended weight, and if it needs a little extra, you can see on this car here. All I did was take some 12-penny construction nails and hot glue them into the chassis. Try and put them so that they're balanced in the car. And that added an ounce or two of weight and made a huge difference in how well that car tracks. One thing I've found that doesn't matter with mechanical standards
Brad.
Sorry, guys. We just had a few audio issues there, but we've got Jeff back, and Jeff's going to show us his layout. So, Jeff, take it away.
All right. Let's do a quick demonstration here. I have made up photo cards for each of the cars on the layout. It was very simple to do. I put a photo on one half of the card and just a background on the other half. Took the files down to Walgreens, had them done up as 4x6 prints, scored them down the center, put some spray adhesive on, folded them in half, and I've got instant car cards. Very easy to do. So, let's shuffle these. And choose 5. So that's the train. The Genesee and Wyoming, the red Santa Fe boxcar, the yellow Kodak tank, the green Burlington Northern Gone, and the state of Maine car. So, I'm going to first two cars on pre-position. And start clearing out some stuff that's on the main line that needs to come on. I'll take these for first. And place those in the middle siding. I'm going to put the P&W at the head of that string. And there's one sticky coupler. And I'm putting 3 cars in the back siding, with the Santa Fe box in the lead. And I can grab the remaining 2 cars off the main line here. And the main line cleared off, start building the new train. I will start with the Santa Fe. Actually, not the one that needs to go in first. That one is. Same for the second. And just like that, turns a little more to the right, and then start that. And so the second. All right. That was good. See what we've got. Let's try it again. We're gonna grab the remaining two cars, put them in line, and we're done.
We had a few audio issues there, but we will definitely get that sorted out and get a recording of this put together and get it back out there. So, Jerry, do you want to take it off from there?
Again, yeah, thank you, Jeff. We did appreciate your demonstration, and sorry that there was just some trouble with the audio of your presentation. Folks, just so everybody knows, we are going to see if we can get this recorded and then get it back up onto YouTube so you can look at it at a later date. And Jeff, hopefully we'll be able to record this afterwards and redo it for you so that people get the full effect of your presentation, because the layout was what you did was really awesome. We enjoyed it.
Very good. Thank you.
All right. So with that, Brad? Well, welcome back. Again, our apologies for the poor audio quality with Jeff's presentation. We are going to record it, and it will be put into the presentations that will be airing on or available on YouTube after next Monday night. So I'm not sure exactly which night it'll be, but it'll be in there. But we're going to take care of doing it on Monday evening. Anyway, so our last layout tour is none other than Doug Dietrich. He's been working towards building an N-scale basement layout. By the way, anybody that's never been up, if you're ever up in the Albany area, it's a great layout to go visit. The layout has been in operation for the past 5 years with regular operating sessions until recently. I have no idea why he hasn't wanted to run them recently, but anyway, he is modeling the prototype from Whitefish, Montana to Shelby, Montana, along the border of Glacier National Park in the 1950s. His favorite parts of the hobby are doing scenery and operation. So let's visit Doug's Great Northern Railway Kalispell Division.
Hi, I'm your host, Doug Dietrich, and welcome to the Great Northern Railway Kalispell Division. Before we begin, I'd like to just go over some general information. Looks like all the reefers have been iced at the ice house. They are being added to the fruit forwarding train, which is heading east. So let's follow along. There's a lumber mill that sits at the Y at Columbia Falls. This is also where the branch line to Kalispell splits from the main. catch up with our fruit forwarding train just as it arrives in Belton. Belton is the west entrance to Glacier National Park. Looks like our VIP train is ready to pull out of Summit. Notice the station is still under construction. Looks like our fruit forwarding was given the green light as well. Located at Essex is a small engine facility along with a small yard. Looks like our VIP train is also heading down to Essex through Marias Pass.
Thank you very much. That was a great presentation of your layout. And for those of you that have never operated on this layout, it's a fun layout to operate. I've had the privilege of running on it myself several times, and it just, the trains all run for N scale, which is great. They all run as smoothly as what you were seeing on that video. It was fantastic. So
Nice.
great job. So anyway, that kind of wraps up tonight's presentation of NERx. Day 3 is now finished. And joining me here in the room are people that have been responsible for working behind the scenes to make things happen. I want to first thank Brad Anderson, who's in the middle on the upper row there. Brad's in Australia. He's the one that's been controlling all the streaming, both out to Facebook and to YouTube. And he's done a great job, especially with the couple of little glitches we had tonight, especially with the streams being shut down on us earlier on tonight and recovering. So again, thank you, Brad. Great job. And then his sidekick, Speed, who's right below him, he's in Texas, just outside of Dallas. And Speed has been one of the people behind the scenes that has made things really look good. He's, as a matter of fact, was responsible for controlling the stream on Tuesday and Wednesday nights, and plus working to sound check us all before we started to try to become amateur TV people. So again, without them, they've made us all look good, and we really appreciate it. And of course, my other co-hosts for the event, again, we thank Chuck for his presentation tonight and his work he did last night. John also for his presentation tonight and the work he did Monday night. And of course, Pete over there in the far corner right, he'll be hosting tomorrow night's presentation. So again, thank you all for watching. Thank you for participating, and keep modeling. See you tomorrow night.
Good night. Good night, everyone.
Okay. We're all fair.